So I had an interesting problem with this compact that I made. And it wasn't really the knife itself. Everything was perfect as far as like blade coming down, nothing catching, smooth. So I was pretty excited, thinking everything was good to go. And I had on the back layer here, I was using the ISC liner, which as far as I could tell, like lines up perfectly with the holes in the Victorinox. Now the only difference on the Victorinox one is they've got this little slight bump out. Now that's where your main blade goes. Now the ISC combo tool, I believe, is slightly thinner, not much. Again, I don't have like any way to measure it. I just eye everything. So I didn't worry about it. I was like, okay, that liner's gonna work, and it did. Like, this thing doesn't come down. I got a Victorinox blade on there. It was fine. But what ended up happening is when I went to put this back scale on, maybe it was my pins were a little bent, but this whole thing was shifted. So what ended up happening is once the knife was done, when you slid your thumb across here, you'd catch the edge of the scale. And for some people, you wouldn't notice that, but like people that probably like these knives that came around that handled them, you're gonna be like, well, this doesn't feel right. Like immediately, you're like, that shouldn't be catching right there. So what I had to do was basically sand this down. You can't really tell, honestly. I don't think you'd ever notice it, but that's what ended up happening. So I had to completely sand this down. I use a sanding block, one of those, like it looks like a sponge. They're unbelievable for working with this stuff because it can get into the grooves, and then you're gonna have to go over it with a finer grit sandpaper. I think I ran out of my really fine stuff. I think all I had was like 800 or something, maybe 1500. And then I have some headlight polish that I use and was able to get that like shine back on it. And you can't really tell. And it's like, if you look at this top layer, it just slightly sticks up. Again, no one would notice that unless you were putting this thing together. But anyway, it worked. But it's like the frustration of dealing with the stuff is, I mean, I thought I was home free, and that came up. So that was a bit of a frustration to deal with. So now I'm moving into like the critical phase on this guy, which is a knife I wanted to do for a while, which is basically the Mechanic Junior with the metal saw, because these are like my two favorite tools. The pliers, power tweezers, and then, see, this may be an issue. If I can dig that out. The metal saw. I love the metal saw. Go on and on about the thing. So this is kind of like a trail guide, except you're putting the pliers on instead of scissors, and I'm doing Phillips versus the corkscrew. I think the trail guide's really neat, which may be my next knife. But the originally, so getting back to like the details on the stuff, right? When you're finally assembling it, you've got to look at everything. Like, did you put your little spacer in there on the blade? So when this thing comes down, it's got just that little extra bit of room. And then your nail nicks, is everything lined up? Okay, looks good. Can you access it? So what I originally had done, I wanted to put the saw on the outer layer, and then I wanted this in the middle. Oh, that's look great. Put the knife together like this. Then you start to do like your final like walk through. And as you can see, if this is here, there's no way to access the nail nick because your saw's on this side, and then you're locked in. So hopefully everything's gonna come together just fine. The other thing you'll see here, again, back to all the little details when you start messing with these stupid things, like I've talked about this before, that pivot point, if you look at the real, like all this stuff is so slight, but these little details will absolutely kill your knife. All right, so look at the top there. See that liner's thicker than the liner below it? And the reason why is because that pivot piece sticks out just enough that if you use like a standard size liner, it's gonna hit. So it's gonna hit your scale, or depending on where you put it, you know, it's gonna hit the next tool on top of it. Now, I don't know what I had done with my previous liner. I had a thicker liner, so what I had to do was double this up. See that? So aesthetically, it's not as clean as I'd like it, but you know this is gonna clear it, so it's safe. And then you just gotta, you know, before I put this finally in, okay, that works. So click, you know, look at the top. And then hopefully it all, you know, comes together. This is like the tough stage, because then you gotta put your little rivets or bushings on there, do your little peening. And you don't want to overdo it, but you don't want to underdo it either. So it's kind of like a trial and error. You just kind of have to deal with it and see what works and what doesn't. And what made this knife actually work out, I surprisingly got lucky, and hopefully my luck continues here, is these pins were from another knife. And I forget where they came from, but they fit. So I didn't have to, these were original Victorinox. It might have been an old Ranger that I'd cut down, done something different, tore it apart. If you can just reuse the pins, your life is so much easier. So I got lucky here. So hopefully this thing's gonna come together and be like my little dream knife of having the saw and the file. It's gonna be pretty cool. It's in a 3-layer. But it's like surprisingly, I don't know, I'll see how it feels in the pocket. I'm probably gonna end up complaining about it like in my next video, but this one's gonna be fun if it works. Again, if it works. So all feels pretty good, but you never know with this stuff. That's the problem with these things. So anyway, that's all I got today. Wish me luck.